Hi there, it's Kevin with the Rogue Market here with this week's episode of the Rogue Roundup, where I give my top 5 picks from the various formats of Magic the Gathering that I am going to be investing in this week. So let's start off the top this week with Legacy. Legacy, I've chosen True Name Nemesis. True Name Nemesis is currently the 11th most played creature in Legacy, and it's been on the rise in decks like Grixis Delver. Grixis Delver has seen a lot of play lately since the banning of Deathrite Shaman led to Miracles really taking over the format, and now it seems like Grixis Tempo deck like Grixis Delver, Grixis Control are starting to combat the Miracles decks. True Name Nemesis currently is going for $12. The one thing it doesn't have going for it is the buy list spread is pretty bad. Buy lists are currently around $5. So keep that in mind when investing in cards. You want to wait until you see the buy lists start to creep up, and then you know there's a lot of movement. The 12 to 5 is a pretty high spread for a buy list, but nonetheless, I think that True Name Nemesis is going to start to go up in price because this is a mythic from Battle Bond, and Battle Bond is very, very hard to find sealed product. The box openings are done, and the draft and sealed of these formats is pretty much over with. So I like True Name Nemesis for those reasons. Next up, we have Pauper. Pauper is Ash Barrens. Ash Barrens is a land that is played in a variety of decks, from anywhere from Inside Out Combo to the various Delver decks, has a lot of synergy with the card Brainstorm, and has pretty much solidified itself as a mainstay in the Pauper format. A lot of people prefer it over Evolving Wilds. It does a very similar effect, kind of a backwards reverse Evolving Wilds. One of the reasons I like Ash Barrens is it's only been printed as an uncommon in an actual sealed set. The rest of the printings were in Commander sets, and in fact, it missed this Commander 2018. That's the main reason I like Ash Barrens. We all expected this card to have another reprinting in Commander 2018. However, it did not. Currently, it sits at the $2 mark, and I think this is a very, very good pickup for not only Pauper, but it has a lot of potential to gain value just because of its use in Commander. So I think you should be targeting the Ash Barrens around the $1 mark, and these will have a pretty steady gain throughout the 2019 season. Next up, we have Standard. For Standard, I've chosen Thorn Lieutenant. This is another one that has a very misleading MTG Goldfish price versus TCG Player Market price versus buy list price, but I really like Thorn Lieutenant because it isn't included in a lot of the Spellslinger or Game Nights or any of these pre-constructed decks that are going to be coming out. Keep your eye on these though. It tends to be that Wizards is creating more of these, not less of these. However, when you find a card that sees as much hype and dodges those particular box sets, I think there's a lot of potential from M19 cards to go up. The main reason I like Thorn Lieutenant is it's seeing a ton of speculative play in all of the green, black, or even mono green lists. It seems to be the ideal 2-drop right now. It will get a bunch of value off of being cast down or Assassin trophied. At least you get a 1/1 green Elf Warrior token back, and it also has the ability to pump it up late game. So it's the best in its slot. The one thing you have to watch out for is if a card does replace it in this slot. I mean, a 2-drop 2/3 is very easy to replace if a card comes out that just is strictly better, or if people start going a color combination that has a card in the 2-drop, like a Glint Sleeve Siphoner type card, for example, that can just knock Thorn Lieutenant out of its slot. However, looking over those deck lists from the pros, it seems to be that almost all Golgari lists, even some Celestia lists, and almost all mono green Stompy lists are running the Thorn Lieutenant. So I like this card. It has a TCG market price about $1.75, but I would try to pick these up at $1 or less than $1 to be competitive with the buy lists. That brings us to Modern. Modern, I am going to go ahead and talk about a card that I have been speculating in for quite some time. I think that it even gets better with Assassin's Trophy and the resurgence of Abzan, Jund, possibly even Sultai. And this is Spell Queller. And it's not because of Assassin's Trophy making Spell Queller decks better, it's because I think that Tempo decks do a very good job of combating attrition decks. Attrition decks like Jund, where they use a lot of discard and targeted removal, are going to have a problem with a lot of value-based Tempo decks like Humans and Spirits. And Spell Queller is used beyond just the Spirit tribal decks. It's actually even used in some Collected Company or Nightfall decks, as it's just a very value creature at a 2/3 and exiling a spell. Doesn't counter, it even exiles it. So even gets around like Abrupt Decays, being able to count to stop Abrupt Decays from happening. So very, very good against the Junds, the Sultais, the Abzans. Spell Queller is currently sitting around the $7 mark. The buy list spread, though, is incredibly thin. Buy lists are picking these up already at $6, so I think that you should match the buy list while trying to pick up the Spell Quellers. Eldritch Moon rare there isn't that much stock of Eldritch Moon rares compared to all of the other sets surrounding it. So Eldritch Moon was one of those sets that was just forgotten about. The rares have already been able to go up to quite substantial rates like Collective Brutality, and I think Spell Queller is going to be very similar to that card. It's going to start creeping up. Currently it's flat. It doesn't look like there's a lot of movement, but the buy lists have already adjusted. So I think if you can be aggressive with this card and pick them up at the $5, $6, even $7 mark, I think it's a pretty good target going forward. Then that brings us to what I consider my best spec for the week, which is back in the Commander format, and this is Sunbirds Invocation. I like Sunbirds Invocation because the Ixalan cards are still pretty fresh, and the supply hasn't been outstretched by the demand for Commander. If you look at Sunbirds Invocation, yes, there was a better time to get in at the 50-cent mark. The foils have already been pretty much eaten up. However, I still like this card at under the $2 mark. It's got a TCG market price around $1.50. Buy lists are still around 80 cents to $1. I think that's the target price for Sunbirds Invocation. The reason I like this, it's one of the most played cards in Commander from the Ixalan block. And it is something you can easily justify being thrown in any mono red or any red deck that doesn't really splash blue. It's red's version of card advantage. In mono red, it's one of the better ones for card advantage, when it allows you that every time you cast a spell to then get value off of that spell. And 6 mana is nothing in Commander. Most of the decks going forward, if you see a lot of the Dominaria generals or the Commanders, and going forward even into the core 2019, most of them are throwing Sunbirds Invocation in those lists. So I expect the demand to outstress the supply pretty soon, and we're going to see a similar growth rate that we saw to something like Torment of Hailfire from Hour of Devastation. Ixalan was opened a lot more than Rivals of Ixalan. However, this $1.75 price point I think is a great time to get into the Sunbirds Invocation, and as you may know, if you're fans of the channel, Commander is the bread and butter of my specs as of late. Until that shifts, I like Sunbirds Invocation for that reason. I hope you enjoyed this list of cards from this week's episode of the Rogue Roundup. Be sure to check back next week, or if you're a fan of this type of financial content, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment. What are your 5 cards you're going to be investing in? Be sure to check out my other channel over at roguedeckbuilder.com for our weekly Market Monday episode. Thanks for watching.